couple of days ago I mentioned the trip out to Skellig Michael, and how one of my American cousins had said, what on earth led these mad monks to go out to this inhospitable and inaccessible rock in the middle of the Atlantic. But when we had got to the top, I think the answer was in the sense of space, of wonder, of beauty that we all experienced when we were there. So the question, why on earth did they go there, is deeply related to the question of earth, and what the earth, the world we live in, tells us about ourselves and about God. And that's the Celtic imagination in particular that celebrated and really rejoiced in the epiphany of creation and the manifestation of God in the life patterns and in the movements of the earth. At the top of Skellig Michael, you find 6 beehive huts, which were the original dwellings of the monks, 2 oratories, 2 places of common prayer, a small graveyard, and a little vegetable garden. And for the rest, they would probably have lived on gulls' eggs and plentiful supply of fresh water from the sky. And their life was very simple. And in all, we don't have any record actually of that particular monastic community, but from all the others, and this one in Skellig was going for about 600 years, and no one was forced to go out there. And from all the other accounts we have of that form of life, they were happy. They had found happiness. They went there because they knew this way happiness lay. And St. Augustine says that people fail to desire happiness enough. You don't really want strongly enough to be happy. We're always looking for something to complain about, something we don't have, somebody else's fault, somebody else is responsible for me not being fully happy. Or it's me, there's something in me that's constantly defeating myself. And to desire happiness is very intimately related to our experience of God and to our life of faith. We can be frightened of the ultimate horizon of happiness, because to desire happiness at this level means that we have to transcend all other desires, just as we do when we meditate. We let go of the desires of the moment, or the bad feelings of the moment, or the negative state of mind we're in, or the fantasy that we are occupied with at that moment. We let go of that for one reason, so that we can enter into the heart where the source of life, the source of happiness is to be found. And so we could speak about, just as we speak about the cell of the heart, we can also speak about the Skellig of the heart. This place where we go regularly, rhythmically, simply, faithfully, in order to be. And we go there into solitude, but we go there in community at the same time. To get to the top of Skellig Michael, you have to walk up about 600 or 700 steps, which have been quite deep steps actually, but they've been cut by hand, generations of Celtic monks, into the rock face. And every year there's people either having an accident or quite recently I heard the story of somebody who was halfway down and froze and couldn't go any further, and they had to get the parish priest in from the mainland to talk him down. I'm sure it's not true, that story, but it's a good story. And so it is a labour. It's a labour of love to walk up. It's possible to do, even if you're not in particularly good condition. You just go slowly, and there are places you can rest on the way, but there's no side rail or handrail. You are walking up it as the monks of the past did. But you have both the attraction of the summit, which is a natural attraction to pull you forward, and you have the support of the people behind you who will hopefully catch you if you fall. And but it's a long hike. It's a long, and you learn quite quickly actually to pace yourself appropriately. You find out quite quickly whether you can't run up it, and you have to find the right rhythm that will enable you to make it with the least amount of drama or trauma. And it's similarly with meditation. Everything depends upon the rhythm, upon the regularity, upon the pace. And some of you, I know, are struggling with meditation every day or twice a day, and that is a struggle. It's not, nobody said it's easy to do, especially with a busy, active life, but believe me, it's also equally challenging for many monks who don't have don't have so many distractions, who also say they don't have time or don't feel drawn to it. So it doesn't really depend upon, it's not really ultimately controlled by the style of life you're living, but by the combination of desire for happiness and the moderate pace, the moderate rhythm or discipline that you decide to follow. And then, with the support and the friendship and the companionship of others. When the monks decided to go out to this isolated spot, they went, one imagines, to be more completely united with what they already knew. They wouldn't have gone that step further in their own pilgrimage unless they wanted to become more closely united with the God that they were seeking, the one that they had fallen in love with, the one that you cannot fall out of love with. And when you live, when you visit the little dwelling, monastic dwelling on the top of Skellig, you see how ordinary that life is. And every life, most lives, have this pulse beat of ordinariness. Sometimes we long for drama, or we long for excitement, or we long for adventure and travel, or whatever. But ultimately, life has this foundation, this pulse beat of ordinariness. And we have to discover that it's not only in the self-dramatizing of our own minds, but it's in the acceptance of the ordinary rhythm of life that we will find what we are looking for. And when you look at the signs of their ordinariness, the kitchen, the oratory, the little vegetable garden, as they were working there, like everybody else, they had to cook for themselves and look after each other when they were sick, and occasionally go into the mainland to get wine for the mass, or bread for the mass, presumably, and so on. But there's this pulse beat of ordinariness, and it's ordinariness transformed by the presence of God. And that is what makes for happiness. If we're constantly seeking fulfillment in the extraordinary, we will always miss happiness. We may have peak moments, but then we get the opposite of the peak moments as well. Happiness, in a sense, I've always felt anyway, means having no need for holidays. I think it's one of the reasons I became a monk. Was that holidays were a waste of time. I always wanted to be on permanent holiday, or to do something that, that's not altogether true. I had a couple of weeks holidays, but I'm dramatising. But it is because we've replaced the idea of the pilgrimage or holy days with the idea of holidays, which is a result of the industrial age and our economic system and the wage slavery that we most people live under. We've lost, I think, this sense that the Celtic imagination and the Celtic monastic lifestyle in community, in those monastic villages, still represent for us. And at the heart of course, of this simple life, whether it's on the top of Skellig or whether it's in the bosom of your families and in the work that you do, the secret to happiness is prayer. It's what we see constantly in those beautiful Celtic poems, the sense that prayer is everywhere, and that we are capable of remaining in the flow of prayer in every state of mind and in every experience. This is how one of the early Christian fathers expressed his origin. He says, "To pray without ceasing is to join prayer with one's own daily work." To pray without ceasing means to join prayer with your daily work. And then he goes on, "The whole of life is one unbroken prayer." Very Celtic insight, that. The whole of life is one unbroken prayer. And a part of this great prayer is what we call prayer. So the whole of life is a continuous prayer, and a part of this great cosmic prayer that we all, the river that we're swept along by, is what we call our times of prayer, or our regular periods of meditation, or our going to church, or whatever. So this explains why Father John says that really there are no forms of prayer, there's only prayer. And in the Christian understanding, the prayer is that prayer of Jesus, which is the prayer of the Spirit, which is the flow of love, this torrent of love that flows between the Father and the Son, and spills over and floods the cosmos and brings about creation, and brings about the human journey itself. All of this would remain very abstract and very privatized, a very individualistic insight if it were not for community. And that is perhaps the great witness of Skellig and of the Celtic Church, really, was their experience of uniting this interior experience, this personal experience of continuous prayer, living in this state of prayer continuously, with community, with the people you live and chop the vegetables with and go to business meetings with, or with the families that you care for as you bring up your children, and so on and so on. And that these are not opposed realities. These are actually part of the same dynamic of creation. And this is perhaps, it explains why the early Celtic monks were so open to sharing their community with married couples, with families, and that the monastic village contained many different forms of life, different lifestyles, different forms of commitment, and probably different stages of life as well. And that's only possible, that inclusivity of the Christian vision of community is only possible if there is this deep contemplative awareness. If your starting point and your common ground is this idea of continuous prayer, flooding and permeating everything. And it's curious why monasticism and marriage in the Christian vision have this this complementarity, that they reflect each other. And as I was saying yesterday, it's the incarnational aspect of Christianity that makes it possible to see these two apparently very different, well, and in fact very different ways of life as capable of being united and of nourishing each other and inspiring each other. Because in the incarnational view of life, God has penetrated into the material world and the human realm of emotions and human development. God's presence is in all of these areas. Then where is the sacred? Or where is the line between sacred and profane? In Christ there is neither male nor female, neither Jew nor Greek, neither slave nor free. So all of the social and even gender distinctions that in ordinary worldly ways we make the divisions between ourselves and other groups, these are simply transparent. I mean, they're still there, obviously, but they're no longer barriers. They're permeable membranes. You can move through them, and people have different lifestyles and have to be faithful to different forms of commitment. And yet there is this wonder of unity that allows us to see ourselves in Christ as one. And this is why the Desert Fathers have such an insight into the relationship between solitude and community, why we can speak about the cell of the heart and the community of meditation. One of the sayings of the Desert Fathers, which would resonate, I'm sure did resonate with the Celtic monks, was a one-off line that illuminates the whole form of their life, really, which was, life and death lie with your neighbour. Life and death lie with your neighbour. So in other words, it's in your relationship with your neighbour. And who is our neighbour? As the parable of the Good Samaritan reminds us, your neighbour is who you choose to be your neighbour. And if you choose for somebody not to be your neighbour, to reject them, to marginalize them, to demonize them, to ignore them, then that's your choice. You live with the consequences. But the alternative is to see that everyone is our neighbour. And we live in a world of expanding circles of relationship. So, our relationship with our neighbour determines the quality of our life. And if our relationship with our neighbour is damaged, is broken, is dysfunctional, then so will our life be. And that is, if we hate our neighbour, or we project our own negativity onto our neighbour, demonizing them, for example, then we are dead. That part of us is dead. Death in the scriptural symbolism is not just biological death. That's relatively, not unimportant, but it is. It's not the primary concern of the biblical writers. Death is that state of soul in which we are no longer being driven by love and fed by love, and we are no longer growing with the food of love. That's death. So life and death are connected to our relationship with our neighbour, which is no doubt why they went to Skellig as a community, and they lived there. And they must have had a certain degree of maturity as monks to live so closely together in such a remote place. They must have overcome, one would imagine, must have overcome, or by that time they must have recognized within themselves the patterns of projection, of blaming others, of demonizing others, which constitute much of human interactions. And they must have been able to be with each other without dependency, without using others as a distraction or as an escape or as a scapegoat. They must have been able to allow others to be solitary, as we on a retreat like this are doing as well. In other words, we allow others to be completely themselves. We're not telling other people what they should be like. Very difficult to do that, especially because we all know better than anybody else. And then he's saying this for your own good. There's a friend of mine wrote a book, she was a language philosopher of social language. And she wrote a book on the language patterns between husbands and wives. And the title of the book, as you might imagine, is I'm only saying this because I love you. And she uses graphic examples. I never met her husband, but she uses graphic examples, such as the woman who comes home with a new hairstyle and says to her husband, "Do you like my new hairstyle?" He says, "Yes, really nice." So she says, "So you didn't like the other one?" Her point is, see, the woman is not saying, "Do you like my hairstyle?" She wants to discuss it. And this is a difference. Just the difference between men and women dealing with this sort of question. So, if we're going to live with others in a life-giving way, we have to recognize that we are different and that we can't be continually trying to change others. If you want to change others, we would all like to change, but if we want to change others in a close relationship, I think the only way you can do it is by changing yourself first. So, those monks on the top of Skellig probably didn't discuss their hairstyle very much. It was probably more like, well, can you clean up my hair? But they were, they must have already made some progress in withdrawing all demands and projections and expectations from their relationships with others. That's solitude and it's love. It's the love that flows freely in solitude. Listen to St. John, first letter of John. My friends, do not blame your troubles on one another, or you will fall under judgment. Do not blame your troubles on one another, or you will fall under judgment. St. James, actually, not St. John. And then he asks this question, what causes fighting and quarrels among you? Is not the origin of these the appetites that war in your bodies? You want what you cannot have, so you murder. You are envious and cannot attain your ambition, so you quarrel and fight. You do not get what you want, because you do not pray for it. So, the insight here is, I think, one that we are putting into practice in meditation, that by practicing the laying aside of thoughts, by letting go of the desires that are wrapped up in those thoughts, the ambitions, the plans, we are also letting go of all of that psychological drama, most of which is, backstage, most of it's in the unconscious. But we let go of that whole psychological drama of projection, of demands on others and telling others what, so and so on. And which is why we may say, as many people do say after they've been meditating for a few months or a few years even, nothing seems to be happening in my meditation. And yet, like I was talking to somebody recently who's been meditating for many years and has led many, many people to meditation, has touched many lives in a wonderful way. But he said to me, Lawrence, he said, I've never had a kind of an experience in meditation. And he said, but I know I'm not supposed to have an experience. I know that's not what it's about. But I've never had any experience. He's a sort of type A personality, and he's never satisfied, and he's always got more to achieve and more to do and so on. And he's brought this into his work in teaching meditation for others in a way that has benefited others immensely. And maybe not him so much, but, well, I think it has as well. And he's got a sense of humour. So I said to him, well, it's all the more remarkable then that you've been so committed to your own practice all these years and shared it with others, and you've got nothing out of it yourself. He said, oh no, I didn't say that. He said, I just said nothing ever happened in my meditation, but my life has completely changed. And that's his insight. It's at that level of experience that we recognize what is happening. If we're looking simply, at the meditation periods, we probably will get caught up in desire and demands and conflicts within ourselves. But if we can really enter into that time of the particular time, what we call prayer, as Origen says, a part of this great prayer is what we call prayer. If we can enter into those times of prayer, really laying aside our demands and expectations, as John Main advises us, really enter into it in poverty of spirit, detaching ourselves from those projections and from those ambitions, and from those preconceptions about what this is going to do for me, then we are really prepared to see and to celebrate what is happening through our prayer, as this continuous prayer flows through us and penetrates every part of our lives. And it's therefore in our relationships, of course, with our neighbour, whoever our neighbour is, that life and death are constituted. And that's the secret of Skellig, it's the wisdom of the desert, and it's the same mystery that we practice in the daily meditation. This is what Clement of Alexandria, also from the 2nd century, tells us about the fruits of this understanding of prayer. This is true purity. When you see the sinful and sick, to have compassion on them and be tender-hearted to them, despising no one, judging no one, hating no one, and making no distinction. Just repeat that. This is true purity. Remember the desert monk said the immediate goal of the life, of our lives, is purity of heart. The ultimate goal is the kingdom of heaven, but that's a little bit, abstract maybe. But the immediate daily goal is purity of heart. And this is true purity, he says. When you see the sinful, who are the sinful? The people you disagree with, the people you judge, the people, who may be unjust and cruel and nasty people. Or the sick. And there are many kinds of sickness, physical and psychological. So this is true purity. When you see the sinful and the sick, to have compassion on them and to be tender-hearted towards them, despising no one, judging no one, hating no one, and making no distinction. So that when you get to the top of Skellig, and you, well, the times I've been there, I've been very lucky because there have always been magnificent, clear days, and you can see forever. Purity of heart is the vision of God. Happy of the pure heart, for they shall see God. But to get there, of course, you've got to climb up through those steps. But the steps have been cut before us. We've got to walk, but somebody has walked there before us. That's community, that's tradition, and that's faith in Christ who has gone before us. And so a time of retreat like this is a time where we can refocus on the steps we are taking in life, and to understand each day, each meditation, each encounter, each decision we have to take as part of a step, or is a step. And maybe we get stuck sometimes. Maybe we take a little break because we get puffed, but then we spend too long resting, and we forget to start walking again. So a time of retreat is also a time to re-incentivize ourselves, to get us climbing again, so that we can see the view.